All right. One of another veteran here of the rally is our next speaker, who has really just been at it forever. He is out almost every night. We see him on TV fighting continuously for our Second Amendment rights, and he's just been such an asset. And we call in these speakers at the national level to get a grander overview of what it is that we're facing at the national level, and to share that information with us, and again, what we can do. So we have assets from inside the state, and we have assets that are national, and we need to be hooked into that. Our next speaker, Gun Owners of America, the biggest, most hardcore groups out there sticking up for our rights. And at the head of that organization is none other than our very own Mr. Larry Pratt.
Stand up!
Thank you for a very warm welcome.
Huzzah!
I was interested in the discussion about the bitter clingers that brought to mind the cross here on the front of this podium. And on Sunday, this serves as my Bible, because I just go to the appropriate website and voila, there's the Bible that I use, and it's multi-purpose. So at home, I'm suitably armed. I'm bitterly clinging to my gun and my Bible. So thank you for reminding me of my state of mind, certainly one day a week at least. We've heard that the left has become unhinged, and it has occurred to me that we could probably make a tidy bit of money for financing such functions such as this one. We ought to buy a boatload of hinges, and when we see these poor leftists just going crazy, we offer to give them a free set of hinges and even screw it in for them, because they're getting loose. You feel bad to see somebody just falling apart in front when all it takes is probably, what, 6 screws and a decent hinge? So let's help them out. We're compassionate people. Most of us are Christian, and we certainly believe in that kind of mercy ministry. Charity is certainly a very fine distinguishing mark of our community. You know, the idea of self-defense is not something that really is in the DNA of a lot of the left. And I think we can see it very easily when we're looking at what Hillary Clinton and her apologists did and justified in Benghazi, where the ability to defend against a Muslim attack in a city known to be a very, very dangerous place, she withdrew the armed protection from the diplomatic outpost that we had in that city. That was the justification for that I had read, was that she didn't want to provoke violence by having too much of a robust presence of armed men. Wow. That is exactly why, in their DNA, whether they always say it or not, I'm pretty sure this is what informs them why they don't like average folks like us walking around with a concealed firearm. That'll just make matters worse. Can't we just talk? And that's just not the way it works, but that's the way their mind works, and I think we have to realize that. And by the grace of God, we have had enough votes to overcome that in the last election. But let's not be overconfident. We've been given a 4-year reprieve with the election of Donald Trump. That is not necessarily going to continue for another 8 years. Even the day after he had clearly won the election, November 9th, there was already talk beginning that he should be impeached. he hadn't even been sworn in. He hadn't done anything as president. He was being challenged with impeachment talk because he breathes. They loathe the idea of this guy being in office. And so, he's beginning to punch back, and I think all of us ought to just jump down the throats of those who are calling for his impeachment and put them on the defensive, because they have yet to come up with anything that makes any sense, that is substantive. We know why they want him impeached. He beat them. And they're going to have to convince an awful lot of Republicans, which admittedly it could be a problem, to go along with their plan. I don't think it's going to happen, but what they're doing is they've already succeeded to a certain extent in throwing him off pursuit of his agenda. And so one of the things that was languishing until earlier this week was the National Carry Bill that's been introduced in the House by Representative Hudson of North Carolina with well over 200 co-sponsors, getting close to an absolute majority of the House, just sponsoring the bill. When you get that many people sponsoring a bill, obviously there are others that are almost certain to vote for it. So it's going to go through the House. I don't think that's a prophecy. I didn't go to Mount Olympus to get that one from on high. And in the Senate, best we can calculate, we're probably one vote short of overriding a filibuster to muscle the measure through. This bill has the votes, and it was just sitting there because the Republican leadership, to name names, Paul Ryan and Senator McConnell, didn't feel concerned enough to move it. Well, now one of their own got plugged. And look at how this happened. Most of you know probably that Alexandria is in Virginia. Actually, a long time ago it used to be in the District of Columbia, and it was ceded back to Virginia. But for maybe 150 years or so, it's been in Virginia. And in Virginia, you can fairly easily get a concealed carry permit, and you can carry a firearm in most places. Certainly, anybody that was playing ball on that field would have been able to have had a concealed carry permit and be packing, or if they were going up to bat and run, they hey Charlie, I'm leaving my gun here on the dugout bench, I'll pick it up when they get back. It would have been extremely possible for them, for their staff, to be armed in some way, but for one little practical problem. Not so much the members of Congress, but certainly the staff, they had to go back into the district, and a member of Congress can take a bazooka into the Congress. But the staff know they're not going to be able to do that. And so we're talking 7 o'clock in the morning, it's probably going to be 8 when they're finished, 8:30. They're not going to go home and then go back through another bit of rush hour to get to Capitol Hill. They're just going to go to the game and then to Capitol Hill unarmed. So the dirtbag had it figured out quite well. He was evil, not stupid. And that, I think, underscores the importance of this national carry bill that is before the Congress. When, I was going to say if, but I think when this thing passes, and it's got a lot more oomph behind it now because some of the members of Congress realize that, this could affect me or people working for me. Now we're getting personal. This is important. And so, because had it not been Scalise, by the way, had it been a number 4 or other lower-ranked Republican, there would have been nobody armed at that game. As it was, he had a couple of cops from the Capitol Hill Police that were there on security detail. Otherwise, it would have been open season, and the dirtbag could have walked around basically a locked cage because there was only one entrance into that field, and the other entrances were locked. And so, unless people were in very good athletic shape and able to scale a high fence, he'd have picked them off. And I think that was his plan. He knew what he was doing. Happily, he made only that one mistake, but Now they see the importance of this measure, and I think we need to double down to get the Hudson, Cornyn in the Senate bill moving. Here's another thing that we don't talk about all that often, but I've got some gray hair, so you can believe I've been around for a little while. And I can assure you that certainly in politics, and especially in Capitol Hill, where one of the stock phrases is, oh, that can't be done. That can't be done now. You don't understand. We have to wait. Well, now I think we are in the position to drive this through, but it's up to us to double down lest they fall back. These people are, by and large, not motivated by ideas. They give great speeches. They give a better speech than I can. No. But when they get back into that environment, they lose their direction, and they have become part of the system that many of them came to fight. John Boehner belonged to the Gang of Six, I think it was, back in the day, probably 30 years ago, to clean up the mess in Washington and to challenge the minority, we're happy to be in the minority forever mindset that prevailed among Republicans at that time. John Boehner became part of that same mindset. And it took a revolt. He actually had to get forced out before he would stand aside. So it's a big problem that we're dealing with, and we're not home free yet. But if we get this thing through, which I think we may now have an opportunity because of these tragic events, then once that has succeeded, like everything else in life, they say nothing succeeds like success. Well, so far, nothing has hurt us more than defeat. And we keep losing, and that leads to another loss, and spirit is lost, and people just are convinced they can't do anything. If we get this thing through and put it on the president's desk, and he's indicated he'll sign it, then I think there are other things that can come along behind it if they're not already amendments on the Hudson bill, such as getting rid of the school zone gun ban. Do you realize, many of you probably have seen the statistic, compiled by Dr. John Lott, who is our institutional numbers cruncher for the pro-Second Amendment movement. He has found, going through all of the mass murders that have occurred in our country, that since 1950, all but 4 occurred in gun-free zones. And these were gun-free zones that were posted either actually on the wall or by law. That's a school, you can't go in there with a gun, that sort of thing. And if we can get rid of those, then it's going to be a lot harder for the next dirtbag that wants to pile up a bunch of bodies to find a place where it's going to be that easy, because once we've gotten rid of the gun-free school zone, teachers will then be in a position where, as they can in many of the districts of Ohio right now, go get training on how to use a gun in a schoolroom situation.
No infringement, then America will be a gun-free zone.
Can you imagine a gun-free zone for the whole country? Well, we are now in the position where we can make this kind of progress, and it's not just happy talk, but we have to get this first victory through. Some of our allies, I'll say, on the pro-Second Amendment front, want to hold this vote over until right before the 2018 election. They don't get it. We want to do it now so that we got a whole pile of victories going into the next election, and along the way we will have made some of these remaining Democrats vote to, well, I shouldn't say cut their own throat, that's I'm not a Muslim, but to eliminate themselves politically, okay? They will wipe themselves out at the polls if they keep voting the way they have been on self-defense. We really are in a position to put a political hurt on them and to get an agenda through that we have not had such an opportunity or such prospects for a long time. In fact, I'm having trouble now really thinking when that was. I remember the one time I've been into the White House, and it was on business, and it was under the presidency of Ronald Reagan, and I went in there to arm wrestle, as it were, in debate, an aide to Ronald Reagan who was for gun control. We had to fight inside Ronald Reagan's White House to defeat a push for gun control. So this is a fight that definitely depends on momentum. Reagan had nearly been assassinated not long before I had gone in, and of course here we have this attempted assassination of, actually it was a whole list of congressmen that the dirt bag had in his pocket. Maybe you've seen that news the last couple of days. But I think we can take a leaf out of Saul Alinsky's playbook, and we can try to make lemonade out of this lemon. This terrible thing that has happened shows the need for people to be able to go about arms. And again, please stop by a hardware store and buy some hinges on your way back home. My wife was born in Panama. She's a foreigner. She was. She's now a U.S. citizen, and she doesn't look too kindly on the invasion of those who think they can come in just because they feel like coming in. That they can, it's kind of like very analogous to somebody saying, hello, give me the keys to your house. I think I like to live in that room of yours upstairs, and I like some of that food that you have in the cupboard, and you owe it to me. That's the mindset of the illegal alien. And I speak fluent Spanish, and I've debated these people in Panama, on television, and radio, and, you know, except for the different language, the arguments are the same. They all assume that being defenseless is the best defense. And I'm here to say that we can cram that down their throat, and we can take this terrible event of this week and use it to show them that their laws left those people defenseless because of the dynamic that I explained about. They'd have to go back to work in this gun-free jurisdiction. Well, relatively, almost gun-free jurisdiction. One of the things that we can be doing to enhance the enjoyment of our liberties, not just our Second Amendment rights, but depending on the issue of your area. If you're a Nevada rancher, it may be the BLM that's running out of control. If you're an Amish farmer in Indiana, you may be making raw milk and selling that to various fabricators who sell raw milk or make cheese out of it or whatever. And the FDA thinks they've got a nose to stick in that business. So there's a lot of different areas involving forestry and mining, and the FDA with the raw milk producer, lots of other areas where the government has gotten involved where it has no constitutional warrant, certainly has no biblical warrant. And one of our life members, I'm happy to say, is Brad Rogers, who's the sheriff of Elkhart County, Indiana. And he was actually ground zero of the great milk battle of 4 years ago. A farmer came to him, obviously hadn't voted for him because he's Amish and they don't vote, and explained that he was being inspected to death by these federal bureaucrats who kept coming after him, harassing him with these inspections because he was selling raw milk. And some of it actually was sold across the state line into Michigan. That gave the feds jurisdiction, don't you know? And so they were getting ready to grab his property during some court proceedings, which he was afraid he might lose. And the sheriff went out to make sure he wasn't buying into defense of a little house of horrors with dead animals rotting all over the place or whatever. And that just simply wasn't the case. As you might imagine, if you've ever seen a place that's involved in raw milk, they are almost obsessive about being clean. And that was certainly the way this farm was. And so Sheriff Rogers communicated with the attorney, the head attorney for the EPA, for the FDA, I get them all mixed up all the time, in Washington, and told her, look, if you folks put another foot on Farmer so-and-so's property, I'm going to put you in my jail. And he got back a surprisingly snotty, maybe not surprising, but a snotty response from the FDA. Well, if you try that, we'll arrest you. And I think the sheriff worded it a bit more diplomatically, but basically his response was game on. And that farmer is still selling that horrible milk that's never been cooked. It was fun. So, by the way, a lot of these things happen legislatively, and we've had some successes, even when our allies sometimes weren't on the same page with us, I'll just put it that way. Like following Sandy Hook, there was a big push even among the Second Amendment community to support an expansion of background checks, which in our mind is just nothing but a registration list, and they've almost never prosecuted anybody after a background check. It's not a crime-fighting tool, it's not a law enforcement tool, it's just a way of building up information the government shouldn't have in violation of the Second Amendment, and we have not been real keen on having them do that. Well, I forget where I wanted to go with that, except that, yes, we were able to stop that post-Sandy Hook drive, and it's ironic that we have to give a lot of the credit to Piers Morgan. Now, I gather from some of the response that some of you at least are familiar with Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan, if you've never heard him or seen him on television, reminds me anyway of your British butler that's gone rogue.
That's good.
And he was very condescending when I was on his program, and he almost got my goat, but I remember thinking, by the grace of God, this guy is behaving in such a horrible way that if you just shut your mouth, he's digging his own hole. When a guy's committing suicide, don't get between him and the gun, okay? That's a good idea. And so I did not get between him and his media gun. And as a result, we ended up with about 1 million or so folks joining our email list, which is a freebie. They went to gunowners.org. That wasn't even on the Chiron, you know, underneath when I was speaking. People had to go on the web, find out where this guy, Gun Owners of America, was located, and then they signed up to get our email alerts. Well, 4 months later, this battle came to a head in the United States Senate, and NRA was supporting the expansion of the background check. We beat him. 1 vote in the Senate, we beat him. And we beat him, and I have to give credit where it's due. Piers Morgan, it was the Piers Morgan Memorial email list that did it. That's how we beat gun control following Sandy Hook. So maybe you're only one person and you can only send 1 email, but believe me, if you've gotten a request from Gun Owners of America, there'll be a lot of other people doing the same thing, and it does get their attention. They don't like it necessarily, but that's part of what we're paying them for, so they cry all the way to the bank. You don't have to feel too bad about it. We're told that we should be more welcoming to the illegal alien. Well, I don't know why we should welcome home invaders. Why should we welcome illegal aliens? And some of them who have been deported multiple times commit some fairly heinous crimes. The poster boy for why we should be serious about enforcing our immigration laws is the fellow that murdered Kate Steinle. Some of you obviously recognize the name. Beautiful young woman walking on the wharf of the San Francisco Bay with her dad, and all of a sudden, boom, she's shot in the back, she collapses to the ground, and her last words are, "Dad, help me." That's all she could say. She was gone. Because a guy that had been deported 5 times, was back again. It was like whack-a-mole. You can't keep them out. Well, there's one way to keep them out, and I think Sheriff Joe used to have a pretty good system for doing that. You just give them some pink undies and you put them in one of his rural retreats, and they can stay there where they're not going to threaten anybody. That's the way you do it. And I'm glad the point was made earlier, but the notion that somehow concern about Islam means that you are treading toward racism reflects an ignorance of what Islam is, and probably is a statement that the person asking such a question or making such a statement has never read the Quran.
Right.
The Quran is a murder manual. It urges, it commands its followers to go and murder infidels if they won't bend the knee to Muslims. They don't even care about what you think about Allah. They just want you to pay the tax and to shut up. And if you look cross-eyed, oh, by the way, they'll take your guns while they're doing it. It's a totalitarian ideology, and for us to even tolerate that in the United States is an indication that we still don't get it. And we don't understand that we've invited a viper into our bosom. And we better start waking up and taking that seriously. Just as a sidebar, when that high-rise tower went up in flames in London, I'll admit my first thought was, I wonder if a Muslim did that. Well, actually, I was wrong. It was an environmentalist that did that. They had to put a certain kind of green, eco-friendly cladding on the side of the building. And even though the fire started on the 22nd floor out of 25, it just spread down the whole building. And the death count is still clicking up. Today I've read that it's well over 30, and unfortunately it's probably going to go higher. So remember this, not only does gun control kill, environmentalism kills.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pratt. Always a pleasure having you up here. Now you see why we invite some of these people year after year. Is, you know, it's never redundant. There's always something new to talk about. There's a new form of tyranny that's at our doorstep. And there's people like Larry that are out there. And God bless you, sir. You stick to it, and you are uncompromising in your battle against these people. So thank you. Quick announcement, someone lost some keys over at the rifle range. If there's anyone that's missing a lanyard and some keys, and can come up and describe them to me, I like to return them to you. We're gonna, I want to make 2 little side announcements. One, in case you can't tell by the smell, dinner is ready. If anyone would like to start filtering in slowly to get your meals, this worked good last year, and little bits of the crowd kind of moved in and out and got their meals at different times. There was no long lines, and it worked well. So from this point on, for the next couple hours, if you get hungry and you like to go in through this door towards the kitchen, they'll get you hooked up with a plate and a nice barbecue chicken dinner. I'd also like to mention a few people that, patriots that have come to this event, and friends of ours that won't be making it anymore. They've passed on, and I'd just like to read a few of their names off, a few at a time, as we go through the agenda today. And among those that we're missing here today is Bud Lorenz,
Yes.
John O'Mara,
Yes.
great patriot there, Larry Kelly,
Yes.
Larry Everett, and Norman Card. They've gone on to sit with the Lord, and they'll be sorely missed. And you know, life's very short. We gotta appreciate each other while we're out there. And my reoccurring theme throughout the day is show love. Let what we do be done with love in our hearts instead of hate and anger. Because I'll tell you right now, and as sure as I am standing here, whichever one of those two things you focus on, you will get more of. If you have anger and hate in your heart, that is the product, that is what you will reap what you sow. So it's okay to be upset and to be emotional, but when you act and when you interact with your fellow brothers and sisters, you have love in your heart, and we'll get where we need to be. All right.